Hey there friends, welcome back to the channel. Alex Lokes here, and today I have a film review for you. And a field film review for you at that. Today I am reviewing one of my favorite classic emulsions, Adox CHS 102. Adox brought back a classic mid-century emulsion in the early 2010s, and I have loved this film ever since and shoot it whenever I can get my hands on the stuff. And thankfully these days it is starting to get a little bit easier for us here in North America to get our hands on Adox and Photo Impex products thanks to a new partnership with Cinestill. So if you have been thinking about getting your hands on CHS 102, now is definitely the time. But where did this film come from? Well, let's head back to the studio. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the background of this film, both historically and my own personal work with the film stock, and go over how I'm going to be shooting the film today, and I will meet you for roll number one in a moment. Formed in 1860, Adox is one of the oldest photographic material manufacturers in the world. Originally producing plates, they also were the company to produce the first plate designed specifically for X-ray photography in the medical field. But in the post-World War II era, plates had fallen out of favor in both the general public and professional fields. So in 1952, Adox released three flexible film stocks, KB14, KB17, and KB21, rated at ASA 25, 50, and 100 respectively. These films were marketed as the German wonder film, with users reporting high silver content resulting in incredibly fine grain, delightful sharpness, and a long tonal range. Production of these films continued until 1962, when Adox's entire production line was sold to the American firm DuPont, who continued to produce this German wonder film. In 1972, DuPont sold the entire production line of these flexible films to Fotochemica in Croatia. They resulted in the production of the new F-Key line of film that used the original Adox machines and formulas, and these films continued that tradition of high silver content, fine grain, and a long tonal range. Of course, these films were only really available on the eastern side of the Iron Curtain. That all changed in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union and the fall of the Berlin Wall and the Iron Curtain. In 1992, a spunky little camera shop in Berlin, Photo Impex, began importing a lot of these Eastern European films for the Western market, and they were a hit. So much so that in 2003, Photo Impex acquired the rights to the Adox name and began to contract Fotochemica out to produce their F-Key films using the Adox branding. Of course, these machines by the 21st century were almost running on 50 years, and the cost of maintaining them soon became prohibitive, that Fotochemica was forced to shut down production in 2012. Photo Impex, not wanting to let a good thing go, decided to investigate reproducing KB21 as a modern film stock that follows in the tradition of that. And as a result, in 2015, they signed a long-term lease with Switzerland's Ilford Imaging, separate from Harman Technology, to produce a modern film stock called CHS 102. This follows the same high silver content, long tonal range, fine grain, and excellent sharpness of the original, but using modern technology. And in 2018, CHS 102 hit the markets. Originally released in sheet and roll film formats, 35mm was added, and unfortunately, due to a bunch of problems, 120 dropped off the face of the earth for a while, but recently has been reintroduced. In 2010, through the Film Photography Podcast, I learned about Freestyle Photographic in Hollywood, California. I immediately hopped on the website and started poking around. Now, I was still very much at the beginning of my return to film as my photographic medium, and I was starting to look a little bit beyond the chromogenic black and white and color negative film I could acquire locally. I was immediately drawn to these F-Key and Adox films because they were touted again as an incredible old film stock from the mid-20th century. Well, I picked up a bunch of rolls, and thankfully I could still get them developed at a professional lab, Silvano's, located in Toronto. And the results I got, I absolutely loved. Now, I ended up shooting a lot of these films, including the ASA 25, ASA 50, and ASA 100 formats in pretty much every roll film format I could get my hands on, both 35mm and 120. These worked really well in abandoned buildings. I also managed to, through Burlington Camera, pick up a partially used box of FK25 in 4x5 format, which turned out to be some incredible results. So it's really nice that I can again shoot the CHS 100 line. I just really wish that Adox would release the slower versions again, but unfortunately that's just not feasible. So for this review, because I'm shooting a classic film stock, I'm going to be using one of my favorite medium format cameras, my Rolleiflex 2.8F. Now, this camera was purchased in Germany in 1969, so I imagine that it did see some use with original Adox and DuPont versions of the film I'm reviewing today. The 4 rolls are all going to be in 120 format, and most of them I'm going to be overexposing by 1/3 of a stop, rating it at ASA 80, and then developing normally. The developers I will be using is Adox FX39II, Ilford Ilfotec HC, Adox Rodinal, and Zone Imaging's 510 Pyro. So enough of the studio nonsense, let's get out into the field and I can talk about these 4 developers and how much they make CHS 102 sing. All right. Roll number 1, I'll be developing this roll in Adox FX39II using a 1:9 dilution. I decided very early on that FX39 provides a much better baseline to what this film can do and what it will look like than D76 does. It's just my own personal taste. So it's only appropriate that a film that came back from the dead, I start off here at St. Mary's Pioneer Cemetery in Oakville, Ontario, Canada. All right. The sky is beautiful. I really wish that fog we had this morning had stayed. It would have given a much more eerie look, but I'll take beautiful sun any day of the week. All right, let's get shooting and I can talk to you a little bit about what I think about FX39 and CHS 102. All right, let's walk. Despite being based on a classic emulsion, my favorite developer for general purpose use is quite modern, Adox FX39II, and it delivers probably the best results for this film while maintaining the classic look and feel. For this roll, I developed it using the standard 1:9 dilution. You get a bright image with amazing contrast and tonal details, with details still visible in your highlights and shadows, probably thanks to that 1/3 of a stop overexposure. While you do see visible grain, it does have a pleasing structure and helps with that excellent edge sharpness. That being said, the grain is more visible in 35mm stocks, while less so on larger 120 inch sheets. The best part is that it doesn't matter what dilution you choose. You get the same results from the 1:19 dilution as you do with 1:9. It all depends on how long you want your bottle to last. Okay, roll number 1 shot. And one of the best things I like about pairing Adox CHS 102 with FX39 is that I get to support Adox 2 ways. 1, by buying their film, 2, by buying their chemistry. And as we all know, it is super important to have a company that can produce both. Now, Adox might not be the largest manufacturer of film and chemistry out there, but they are a player in the game. And if we want to continue shooting this medium, it's important that we support anyone and everyone who actually goes out of their way to produce film and chemistry. Because frankly, I don't think I could go back to developing my film at a lab. I just love the control it gives. But enough rambling. You want to see roll number 2 shot, so I will see you tomorrow. All right, we're on to roll number 2. So today I'm going to be shooting the film at full box speed of ASA 100 instead of putting it that third of a stop over at 80. And I'll be developing an Ilford Ilfotec HC using the 1:63 dilution. Now, there's no official times for 1:63. Instead, you take the 1:31 dilution time and double it. So in this case, 5.5 minutes becomes 11 minutes. I knock it back 10% because I do constant agitation, and I come up with 10 minutes total. All right? It is an absolutely gorgeous spring day, so let's go.
When I originally reviewed CHS 102, I used the 1:39 dilution for the Ilfotec HC roll. That's dilution D in HC 110 parlance. And I wasn't pleased with the results. I had a compressed tonal range, way too much contrast, and almost a complete lack of shadow detail. So, for this review, I went with a 1:63 dilution, shooting the film at box speed. Then, I doubled the official listed dilution B 1:31 times of 5.5 minutes, then ran the development at constant rotation. Well, the negatives were thin when I pulled them out of a tank, and it took a bit to get workable images from the scan. I think what caused this wasn't the development, but rather some off-axis light confusing my light meter. But the frames that did work were incredible, with a nice long tonal range and a beautiful middle contrast. But the real surprise was that there was almost no grain, while maintaining excellent edge sharpness. This roll certainly redeemed this combination in my view.
All right, so that finishes up roll number 2. I'm really looking forward to seeing these results. You have already seen them and have heard me talk about them, but this is my first time actually using the 1:63 dilution with the roll. Having access to this beautiful valley right next to work is an absolute blessing because it always gives me a place to take pictures very quickly on a lunch break. But enough about that. I will see you in a few for roll number 3. Okay, here we are, roll number 3. And this roll I'm going to be again shooting at ASA 80 and then developing normally in Adox Rodinal 1:50. And if you haven't used Adox Rodinal, know that it is based on the original 2004 AGFA formula, which is the last version that was developed by AGFA before they did their reorganization. And it's just great to have Rodinal again being produced under the Rodinal name and out of Germany. All right, time's a-wasting, the sun is bright, let's get shooting.
If you dislike visible grain, then maybe skip Rodinal, especially if you're shooting 35mm. Sometimes you just need to embrace the grain, and you certainly do with this combination. Now, the visibility of that grain is greatly reduced on these larger negatives, but it's still present. But don't let that stop you, because you get the full experience and level of edge sharpness that CHS 102 delivers. Also, you get that nice long classic tonal range and middle contrast. And thanks to that slight overexposure, you maintain your shadow and highlight details. Personally, I wouldn't recommend using a stronger dilution, as that might bring the visible grain and contrast up a little bit more than what you want, but you can always lengthen the tonal range by running the film through a semi-stand development using either a 1:100 or a 1:200 dilution. Although for those, I would recommend shooting it at box speed.
All right, that is the third roll done. So I guess that means I will see you tomorrow when we shoot the fourth and final roll. And if you know my photography, you can probably already guess what developer I'll be using for roll number 4. See you in a bit. Okay folks, fourth and final roll. And I am again going to be shooting this roll at ASA 80, and I'm going to be developing it in what I think is the best developer for CHS 102. That being Zone Images 510 Pyro. So, time's a wasting, the light is again gorgeous, so let's go.
And saving the best for last, in my opinion, is the roll developed in 510 Pyro. It's almost like these two were made for each other. There's a brightness to the image, a deep, rich contrast and long classic tonal range. The edges are sharp, and while there is a bit of visible grain, it's not that bad, and it's incredibly pleasing. And it also made scanning the film a dream. The stain is present in the negative, but not overpowering, which will make printing the negatives easier. These images represent how I feel the original Adox version of this film would have looked. Oh, and this combination also works to help compensate for extreme overexposures by a stop in 2/3. Yes, I have shot CHS 102 at ASA 32 and then pulled it in development. And while it didn't give that Panatomic X looks, it certainly came close.
It's always bittersweet when you finish off the last roll in a 4-roll review, but I really enjoy the fact that I can get CHS 102 in 120 again. So let's head back to the studio. I can share my tips and tricks for developing and scanning and go over a few alternative developers that can make CHS 102 look amazing. All right, and I'll see you in a bit. So if you've worked with the original F-Key films, you'll know that extra special care needs to be taken during the development process. That means using a water stop bath and a hardening fixer. Now with one of my last rolls of Adox CHS 100 Art, the original stuff based on F-Key KB100, I forgot this and I used an acid stop bath and a non-hardening fixer, and some of the emulsion actually peeled right off the film base. Thankfully, film technology has advanced a lot since the 1950s, and some of those advancements Adox has managed to bake into CHS 102, including modern cascade coating and integrated hardeners in the emulsion. That means you can go ahead and use an acid stop bath and a fixer. This film also does really well in both standard hand agitation on tanks and rotary-based processing methods. You can also easily send it to a pro lab that uses a dip and dunk or an automatic machine for processing black and white films and get excellent results out of it. Now, one other thing that CHS 102 has is a polyester film base. That means for most of the year, it will dry perfectly flat. Now, I have encountered a bit of minor cupping with the film, but nothing that a bit of back rolling can't fix after about 12 hours or so sitting in a tightly wound state. Another thing that the film does have a problem with is just regular curling. Again, that back rolling will help prevent a lot of the problems with that. And sometimes it is a bit of a struggle to get it to lie flat in my film holders for my scanner. Now, most of the scanning that I have done with this film has been using my Epson V700 and Silverfast 9 SE, and this combination handles the film wonderfully. And then with a bit of minor correction in Adobe Photoshop, it looks absolutely spectacular, especially when scanned at 2400 DPI, which is what I normally scan almost all my film at. Might be a bit overkill, but I like working with the larger files. It can really help tune my images better. The one scanner that I did have problems with this film is my Nikon Coolscan 5. I found that the polyester base is a little bit too thin for the scanner, which is designed for thicker acetate-based films. So I would recommend using either a digital camera setup or a flatbed scanner for best results. Because of the difficulty getting my hands on CHS 102 until recently, I haven't really developed the film in a wide variety of chemistry. There's also not a lot of combinations listed online, either through the official datasheet or the massive dev chart. But I have done it in a handful of other chemicals and have gotten really spectacular results. While not my favorite, Kodak D76 at a 1:1 dilution is a fine way to develop CH102. I personally find that even at the 1:1 dilution, the contrast is a little bit too high and you are losing a lot in your shadow details. Now, it could very well have been the conditions I was in at the day, but I've even tried it in better conditions and even with a bit of exposure, and the results still aren't exactly where I want it. So that's one of my big problems. You don't get that same level of tonality and contrast where I want it with this combination, and the grain is a bit more exaggerated, and I really don't see that same level of sharpness. So if it's the only thing you have, that's great, and it might take a bit of time for you to fine tune where you want it, but honestly for me, D76 and CHS 102 is not the best combination. Now, when it comes to developing CHS 102 in Adomal 49, you get a delightful result. Shooting it at full box speed yields excellent results, and you can get the same results whether you are shooting it with developing it in the stock dilution of Adomal 49 or the 1:1. You get that beautiful long tonal range, excellent middle ground contrast, a bit more visible grain, but nothing too bad, but you do have that excellent edge sharpness that the film is known for. If you don't like that visible grain, probably the best developers that you can use is Adox XT3 or Kodak Xtal. They're basically the same thing. Now, I would recommend using a 1:1 dilution because it really does help soften that grain without sacrificing too much of your edge sharpness. Now, again, this would be a combination that I would recommend being very careful with your metering and ensuring that you are using the freshest mix of XT3 as possible. And if you do want to get a little bit more out of your shadows, overexposing it and developing it normally by shooting it at ASA 80. I really like the results I got out of Xtal, especially when shooting it in 4x5, but 35mm is all right too. So the weirdest developer that I've used to develop CHS 102 is Adox Scala. If that name rings a bell, it should, because Scala was Agfa's black and white transparency film, and the Adox Scala kit allows you to transform your black and white negative films into black and white positive films. And because of that polyester base being perfectly clear, Adox CHS 102 is the perfect mix for that. Now, you are going to see an increase in contrast, and it is recommended that you shoot it at box speed, but I'm sure that slightly over will work too. Now, I've only done this once because the reversal process is a bit maddening and time consuming, and it feels so weird re-exposing that film to light and getting that just right. But the results are absolutely spectacular, and it certainly is something different to try. So there are plenty of other great combinations to use with your CHS-100 too. A few that I would recommend, including Spur HRX. I've seen some excellent results online. Adox Silvermax, which is great for high silver content film. And even though they don't make the Silvermax film, the developer is still readily available. And despite the fact that I love what I get with FX39, I think that Tetanol's Neofin Blau would be another good choice for developing your CHS-100 too. So ultimately the choice is yours, and I do recommend experimenting in a controlled way to get the results you want out of CHS-100 too. All right, well that wraps it up for this review. I want to thank you so much for sticking around. It's viewers like you that really help push me to get these long form film and camera reviews done. So if you are new to the channel, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell notification icon and giving me a thumbs up. If you've used CHS-100 too, what is your favorite developer combination? And have you shot any of the original Adox or F-Key films, and what were your experiences with them? Honestly, I miss them, which is why I am so glad that Adox has brought back CHS-100 too, and I can't wait to use it more at any sort of timeline or World War I, World War II events I managed to get out to this summer. And as always, shoot what you love, with what you love, on what you love. Don't give in to the hype.